always comes back to the games, guys. And this is what Xbox says they understand, except their left hand's doing one thing and the right hand's doing another thing.
Microsoft are in federal court this week defending their proposed $68.7 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard following legal action by the FTC in the US. So basically the FTC don't want it to go through, and Microsoft are having to present loads of evidence to show that it should go through. Microsoft are having to give away all these internal emails as part of the evidence. And one of the emails that's come out is an Xbox exec Matt Booty talking to Microsoft CFO Tim Stewart. This is Matt Booty to Tim Stewart. A different view to the general view might be that we, Microsoft, are in a very unique position to be able to go spend Sony out of business. If we think that video game content matters in 10 years, we might look back and say, totally would have been worth it to lose 2 or 3 billion in 2020 to avoid a situation where Tencent, Google, Amazon, or even Sony have become the Disney of games and own most of the valuable content.
I'm reading all this and I'm seeing this come in and I'm just like, what gives you the right? It's like when you're playing Monopoly, to use an analogy, you're playing Monopoly and Microsoft just takes as much of the money as it wants to buy up all of the in this case, developers on the board. Like, it hasn't reached that position fairly because it's outside income that's allowing it to do so. And then the last point, just specifically on this email, because everybody knows this is the intention. Everybody knows that Xbox would love it if Sony wasn't, making PlayStation content. But it's this sort of Phil Spencer and co. speaking out of both sides of their mouth, telling gamers one thing, like, oh, we just want to be everywhere. We want to make all gamers can play together. And then it's hardly surprising to see Matt Booty say, we could just spend PlayStation out of business. We got the money. Let's go to Daddy Microsoft. Daddy Microsoft, can I have 50p to spend PlayStation out of business? Oh, thank you. That's the only way I could put it. That's what's happening. It's ridiculous.
I mean, I think the thing that I would say to what Aaron's just saying is, how many times are we sitting here thinking PlayStation have never had those conversations too? There's been loads of examples of PlayStation making games exclusive to PlayStation, and buying out developers to make those games exclusive and all sorts. But I think it's underhanded. I wouldn't like to do that if I owned a company. But then I don't own a company, and I don't know what the parameters of competition are like. I don't know how shady they're actually being. But I do think it's quite a shocking thing to sort of say we're seriously thinking about how we can get them out of business. I think that's the aspect that's it's one thing to want a company to be out of business so that you can sort of hold the monopoly on all of those things, but it's a completely different thing to say, to sort of imply that you're actually having conversations around how we would do it.
Phil Spencer admitted that the reason that they bought Bethesda was because PlayStation we're going to take Starfield as a PlayStation exclusive. Spencer said, ZeniMax is a great example. When we acquired ZeniMax, one of the impetus for that was that Sony had done a deal with Deathloop and Ghostwire and pay effectively Bethesda to not ship those games on Xbox. It was then necessary to secure ownership of ZeniMax and Starfield to keep up its rate of new games on Xbox. He said, we can't be in a position as a third place console where we fall further behind on our content ownership. I would argue that was part of the strategy that we talked about before. That seems to be part of the thing that Matt and Tim were talking about in that email. That seems to have been following that discussion. Okay, let's just buy Bethesda. Let's stop Bethesda making PlayStation games. Let's just take it off their hands, and then we can just put it all onto Xbox. And that's what's happened with Redfall and Starfield, which is coming out in September.
I'm kind of on the fence about whether I think it's really bad or actually fair play to them for actually winning it and just sort of going, well, if you're going to do that, PlayStation, watch this. But with all this other stuff going on around it, it kind of makes it feel a little bit more dirty. It's not just a straight bid for a game to be exclusive on your console. There's all this other stuff going around as well that just adds this layer of sort of shadiness to it to me. But they won the game, and I guess they're allowed to do that. Like I say, the thing that shocks me is that you're allowed to do that. There's no regulation in place to say, no, you just have to bid and make a deal and offer the best deal and, get it that way. But rather than just buy out, because that suddenly starts feeling like somebody's trying to monopolize something. and that's never really a good thing, in my view.
The reason why we're even talking about this like almost 2 years after it happened is because of Bobby Kotick's and the share and the board's greed, essentially. Like, they could only come to a figure that was ridiculous and, 60, almost pushing 70 billion. But I just want to pick up on something that Matt sort of brought up, because yes, PlayStation do make exclusivity deals with publishers, and we're seeing that right now. We're right in the middle of it in terms of Final Fantasy 16. Sales numbers for that came out today. It released not even a week yet, I don't think, and it sold like 3 million copies, which is a lot for a game that's platform exclusive. And Xbox has done this before. For Xbox 360, they secured Rise of the Tomb Raider, and I would argue that in that instance it was a bit more underhanded, to use Matt's term, because the previous game in that series was multi-platform, so they were actively taking it away. Like, Tomb Raider was on PlayStation, then it wasn't, because Xbox threw its money around. Yeah, they can do this. They can take the monopoly money, from behind, to you carry on that with analogy. But all this is because, and the reason they call themselves, they're like, oh, woe is me, we're third place competition and we simply couldn't allow us to fall behind any further. The reason you're falling behind any further is because you refuse to put out good games in a timely manner, which is what people buy consoles for. This is a mess of your own making, and they're trying to buy their way back into being competitive. And we as players are going to end up suffering in the long term as a result, both in terms of I own a PlayStation and now I can't play this game on PlayStation, and Xbox Game Pass is suddenly so expensive because they've priced out everyone else in terms of the subscription market. So I've got a lot of trouble trying to build up any form of sympathy for Xbox, which is basically the entire play in the FTC court case. It's like, look, we're losing, we're actually not that bad. It's like, well, if you're losing, you're not that bad. Again, to go back to that point, what gives you the right to try and, there are no, why do you get a shortcut? Matt said that PlayStation could have done this as well. The difference is that they can't. They don't have 69 billion just on the side to throw at anybody they like. And, PlayStation, Sony, for the longest time, I don't know what the case is now, like, the gaming arm was the only arm that made money. And I think that's very telling. Whereas it's the complete inverse on the Microsoft side. The gaming side, the Xbox division, makes very little money, and it still doesn't make very little money. Whereas PlayStation is one of the main, money makers in terms of Sony. And they've got that way there, in my opinion, for the most part, fairly. And this whole thing about Deathloop and Ghostwire went to PlayStation because they secured exclusivity deals. Again, to go back to my initial point of it's a mess of Microsoft's own making, when this initial quote came out that Xbox bought Bethesda because Starfield was at risk of becoming PlayStation exclusive, that's at the point where you as Xbox need to take a look at yourself and see and think, right, why is this happening? What have we done to the extent that publishers don't feel comfortable putting games on our platform? And the simple answer is that they screwed people over and players over on the Xbox One generation, despite having a very heavy lead during the generation before, Xbox 360, which they bungled as soon as they revealed the Xbox One, to the point that they're trailing behind, that they don't want to announce the amount of Xbox One units sold. Now they don't want to announce the amount of Xbox Series X units sold. So if I'm Todd Howard at Bethesda, I'm looking at, okay, PlayStation sold 10 million, Xbox has sold 3 million, and not only that, but PlayStation are offering us some money to sweeten the deal, then surprise, surprise, Deathloop and Ghostwire are going to go on PlayStation. And if Xbox didn't have that money purse, then it wouldn't happen. But if I was Xbox, I'd be saying, right, well, why is our Xbox only selling this much? Oh, it's because we're not putting out games at a fast enough rate, exclusive games from our own internal studios, that makes people want to buy an Xbox over PlayStation. Whereas PlayStation's got Spider-Man, PlayStation's got God of War, PlayStation's got Ratchet and Clank, PlayStation's got Demon's Souls, it's got all these great first-party games. It always comes back to the games, guys. And this is what Xbox says they understand, except their left hand's doing one thing and the right hand's doing another thing, because they're like, oh, we believe in great games, we're making great games. And I brought it up before, but had they not bought Bethesda, we'd be looking at a very barren release calendar for Xbox Series X right now. And it also came out this week that the Indiana Jones game was originally signed up to be multi-platform for PlayStation prior to the Bethesda thing. They're ripping games away, Redfall, Indiana Jones from PlayStation, who have built up that reputation fairly, and Xbox have just come in and they're trying to spend their way back into competition. I was in a room with Todd Howard, Matt Booty, Sarah Bond, and Phil Spencer after the Xbox showcase. And Todd Howard said, they've been doing this line in all of the Starfield marketing. We've had a great relationship with PlayStation in the past. Oblivion came to Xbox. The best version of Skyrim was on Xbox. And now I find it very interesting that Todd Howard's going, oh, we're so chummy with Xbox. We're so chummy with Xbox. Well, up until 2 years ago, there was a point where none of your games were apparently going to be on Xbox. So at this point, it's just confirmed to me that regardless of what these business people say at the top, they're just telling you what you want to hear.
Jim Ryan was interesting. He gave a bit of testimony yesterday, the PlayStation boss, Jim Ryan. So he says that Sony won't give dev kits to Activision if the acquisition goes through, because it could release some of Sony's secrets to Microsoft, so they wouldn't do that. He also said that he expected Redfall and Starfield to come out on PlayStation prior to Microsoft's acquisition of ZeniMax. So that was a bit of a surprise. But then he said that it's not anti-competitive. He sort of took that on the chin, sort of thing. He also said that he got an email. Xbox's original proposal to keep Call of Duty and Activision games on PlayStation was not meaningful. Key titles were missing. For example, his offer included Overwatch, but not Overwatch 2. The deal was not negotiated. Spencer sent it to Ryan via email, and Ryan rejected it without a counter proposal. How spicy is that? Just the two heavyweights just in an email chain. I'd just love to see that. It was redacted, of course. He also said in an email with the former PlayStation boss, Ryan said he believed the Activision's the acquisition of Activision was not a play for Xbox exclusivity, but rather for King's suite of mobile titles, which is really interesting. I think that is interesting. And then the last thing he talked about as well. He says that an email from Phil Spencer last August set the alarm bells ringing at Sony, but the contents of the email were not shared to the court. So this is just give me more. I just want more. We still haven't heard from Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. We haven't heard from Bobby Kotick of Activision, who is also due to give evidence, and Nvidia's SVP Jeff Fisher is also set to give evidence as well.